everyone, I'm Nitzahone, and right now it is limited review week here on my channel for Guilds of Ravnica. So far, I've looked at every single monocolored card in the set and given my thoughts about it for this new limited format. Today we're delving into the gold cards, which is really where, the most exciting cards for the most part are in this format because it's a Ravnica set and gold cards are a huge part of the format. Today we're looking at the Dimir, the Selesnya, and the Izzet cards. Normally, the way I do these reviews is I look at cards based on set numbers, but I actually instead decided to divide this particular list by guild. That's what the next video will do as well when we look at some more gold cards, because I thought it would be better to look at the cards in the same color pair together because, they're actually going to be played together more regularly. If you're new to my set reviews and you don't know how I grade these cards or what the grades mean, you can find a link in the description below that will take you to a video where I explain all of that. Now, let's move to our first gold card, which is Artful Takedown, which for 2 generic, a blue and a black, is an instant at common. It's a modal card that says choose one or both. Tap target creature. Target creature gets -2/-4 until end of turn. This card is pretty absurd for a common. Yeah, you have to be blue-black to play it, but this format has tons of fixing, and you can even splash this if you have to. The fact that it can kill a ton of creatures with the -2/-4 part is where it gets most of the value, but obviously tapping an opponent's creatures, not bad either. This can break up a lot of board stalls by killing a creature and tapping down the best creature left. I honestly think that in a weak pack, this is a reasonable first pick. Chances are better than usual in this format that you end up in the color of a gold card you take, since there are really only 5 color pairs that are heavily supported here instead of the usual 10, and there's plenty of fixing. It still isn't as good as a monocolored removal spell, of course, but it's pretty good. I'm starting it at B- to reflect that again. In a weak pack, I'll take this and see if I can go blue-black. Next, we have Connive and Concoct. This cycle of cards is cool. Split cards are always cool. I'm glad they're back. But what I don't like is that there's no good way to say them. All the other ones have some sort of naming convention, whether it's, there are always pairs of things that go together, whether you put and or to or whatever between them. In this case, you don't do that. I guess you just say connive and concoct. It doesn't really roll off the tongue because it's not a phrase. Anyway, that's a different topic for a different day. We're here to talk about the cards, which are connive and concoct. It's a split card. If you're not familiar with those, you have to pick one of these and cast it, and when you do, the whole card goes into your graveyard. In this case, one side is Connive, which for 2 generic mana and then 2 blue-black hybrid mana. Another thing you may not be familiar with. Hybrid mana can be paid by mana of either of the color that is involved with it, which in this case would be blue or black. So you can pay 2 blue-blue or 2 black-black or 2 blue-black, etc. You get it. So that half says gain control of target creature with power 2 or less. The concoct half, also a sorcery, for 3 generic, blue and a black, says surveil 3, then return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. I think this cycle, both its uncommon and its rare variant, are really expertly designed, with one half of the card usually being something more situational and lower costed, and the other half just being inherently powerful. This part of the cycle is actually the least like that, at least in terms of one half costing a lot less, as the connive half only costs 1 less than the concoct half. Still, it is definitely a situationally powerful effect, as sometimes your opponent will play a pretty scary creature early and stealing it is the way to go. The other half, concoct, also feels less powerful and more situational than the other cards from this cycle we're going to get to. Sure, it is a rise from the grave effect that lets you try to stock your graveyard first while also improving your future draws, and that's nice. But there will definitely be times when the concoct half is not especially impressive. Overall, this card is good, and you'll always play it in blue-black, but it isn't powerful enough to coax me into that color pair all on its own, and that makes it a C+. Next, we have Darkblade Agent, which for 1 generic, a blue and a black, is a 2/3 human assassin at common, and as long as you've surveilled this turn, Darkblade Agent has Death Touch and gains whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. A big theme in blue-black is surveilling. That's the mechanic for the Dimir in this set. And this is a cool card. A 3 mana 2/3 isn't great, but not far off from what you expect. And on top of that, it's a good payoff for surveilling since it can gain Death Touch and draw you cards when it hits the opponent. Creatures that have both Death Touch and the Curiosity ability are really frustrating to deal with, and that's what this is a certain percentage of the time. Nice thing is, too, if you have instant speed ways to surveil, you can really get your opponent on both sides of combat. It isn't going to be hard to find cards that surveil in this color pair. I think your average blue-black deck will end up with like 3 to 5 without even trying, so I think this card basically always makes the cut, and I think it's a C+. Next, we have Dimir Spybug, which for a blue and a black is a 1/1 insect at uncommon. It has flying, it has menace, and whenever you surveil, you put a +1/+1 counter on Dimir Spybug. A 2-mana 1/1 flyer with Menace is not especially good, but since it is in the Dimir colors, we have to think about the typical blue-black deck when we consider how good this card will be. Your typical Dimir deck will have a hard time not picking up at least a few ways to surveil, as we just said, so this becomes a 2/2 in a lot of scenarios, and that's not really a stretch. And I think that makes it a C in your typical blue-black deck, maybe a C-. If you end up with a lot of ways to surveil, it pushes into the lower B- range. This is a nice win condition for a surveil-heavy deck. Next, we have the other split card, the uncommon one, Discovery and Dispersal. On one half, it's one generic and then hybrid blue-black mana, and it says Surveil 2, then draw a card. On the other half, it's Dispersal, and it's 3 generic, a blue, and a black, and it's an instant. Keep that in mind. This one has 2 different card types on one side and the other. I think sometimes people assume it's the same on each side, but it is not on the Dispersal side. And it says each opponent returns a non-land permanent they control with the highest converted mana cost among permanents they control to its owner's hand, then discards a card. Like most of the cycle, this is pretty strong, and I actually like this one more than I like the rare split card for the Dimir. I think this one's better. The Discovery half can be cast if you're struggling to hit land drops in the early game, but obviously the Dispersal half is where the real power is. Sure, it doesn't let you choose what to bounce with it, but a good percentage of the time, the permanence with the highest converted mana cost is the answer to bounce. That's what you want to bounce anyway. And adding a discard effect to that is great, especially if they have no cards in hand. That does help it against cards that have enter the battlefield effects, for example, because that card, if your opponent's hand is empty when you cast it, will just go to the graveyard. Overall, I think this is strong enough to push you into taking it with the first pick and seeing if Dimir works out. I'm going to give it a B-. Next, we have Disinformation Campaign, which for one generic, a blue, and a black is an uncommon enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card and each opponent discards a card. Whenever you surveil, return Disinformation Campaign to its owner's hand. I like this card a lot. 3 mana for you to draw a card and your opponent to discard a card already gives you a 2-for-1, and that's nice. Worth noting, though, that this format does have decks that won't mind discarding as often as they would in most formats. Since, as we've said, this is blue-black and there's basically no way you don't pick up a handful of cards with Surveil, I think even if you only have that many, this is probably like a C-. If you get to 7 or more ways to Surveil, it moves all the way up to a B- and will be a really fun way to grind you to victory as you just outcard your opponent. It's something I hope to do multiple times in this format. Next, we have Atrata the Silencer, which for 2 generic, a blue, and a black is a 3/5 vampire assassin. It's legendary, it's rare, it can't be blocked, and when it deals combat damage to a player, exile target creature that player controls and put a hit counter on that creature. That player loses the game if they own 3 or more exiled cards with hit counters on them. Atrata's owner shuffles Atrata into their library. This is really cool design-wise, and I also think it's pretty strong and limited. However, don't expect to win with hit counters basically ever unless you have like 2 of these, then maybe we'll talk. Basically in limited, this amounts to a 4 mana, do 3 damage, and exile a creature spell with suspend 1. It has some things going for it that make it better than that. For example, it can block for a while if that's what you desperately need. But it also has some things that aren't so good, like it can be destroyed or shut down with an aura before doing the removal part. So the comparison isn't perfect, but I think it's close enough. Think of this mostly as a removal spell, not a win condition, and you're being realistic about it. I think it is good enough removal to consider taking with the first pick despite being gold. I think it's a solid B. Next we have House Guildmage, which for blue and a black is a 2/2 human wizard at uncommon. You can pay 1 generic and a blue to tap it, and target creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. You can also pay 2 generic and a black to tap it and Surveil 2. So all the guild mages are pretty good this time, just like they were the other times. This one can make it so a creature can untap, which is nice, but the creature has to already be tapped for it to matter. Keep that in mind, don't misread that. And it can also Surveil 2. Both of those abilities are nice mana sync abilities, with the latter one being a great way to win a long grindy game, since you'll be improving your draws while your opponent is stuck relying on luck. You will play this in any Dimir deck you ever draft, but I don't think you want to take it first pick over monocolored cards in most cases, and I'm going to give it a C+. Next, we have Lazav, the Multifarious, which for 1 blue and a black is a 1/3 legendary shapeshifter at Mythic Rare. When it enters the battlefield, you Surveil 1, and he has the activated ability to pay X, and he becomes a copy of target creature card in your graveyard with converted mana cost X, except its name is Lazav the Multifarious. It's legendary in addition to its other types, and it has this ability. A 2 mana 1/3 with Surveil is probably already like a C. Obviously, Lazav does a lot more than that, as he is capable of becoming copies of creatures in your graveyard. His Surveil ability can help you get started if you're lucky, but ideally, you have other ways of milling stuff. The idea of playing him on turn 2 as a reasonable 2-drop and then turning him into creatures you mill seems awesome. Blue-black looks like it won't have a ton of issues milling thanks to Surveil and cards that just straight up mill, so I think he will be pretty good in those decks. I think he's strong enough that he's worth first picking. I mean, he does require a little bit more effort than your average, like, first pickable gold card, but his fail case is that he's still a perfectly reasonable card as a 2-mana 1/3 with Surveil, and his success case is awesome. I think he's a B. Next, we have Mnemonic Betrayal, which for 1 generic, a blue and a black, is a mythic rare. It says, exile all cards from all opponents' graveyards. You may cast those cards this turn, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast those spells. At the beginning of the next end step, if any of those cards remain exiled, return them to their owners' graveyards. Exile Mnemonic Betrayal. Cool design. I think this has the potential to be game-breaking in games that go long. But, you know what? All the other times, good luck really taking advantage here. How much mana will you have left after you cast this, and how many spells can you realistically cast after you do? If you have less than 6, you won't be able to do much. At 6, maybe you get something alright. I don't know. You probably want to have like 10 mana when this goes down, or more, and then you can do some wacky things. But a card that is only good in the extreme late game probably isn't worth playing. Maybe siding it in against someone with a super low curve is worth it, but then if they have a super low curve, there's a greater chance they kill you before you can cast it. I don't know. I think it's just an F. Next, we have Night Veil Predator, which for 2 blue and 2 black is a 3/3 vampire at uncommon with flying, death touch, and hexproof. There's a whole cycle of these uncommons that cost 2 colors. There's a whole cycle of these uncommons that cost 2 of each color in the guild that it represents. In this case, we're looking at the Dimir one, and they're all pretty strong. And this one is maybe the best of them. I don't know, we'll see. We all hit hexproof and limited, and this comes with built-in evasion too. Yay! Sure, yeah, it's the kind of card that's hard to cast, but again, not going to be the hardest in a format like this one. There's lots of fixing. What's more, this is good whenever it is you manage to get double of each color, even if it's later than turn 4. It represents the end of the game if you can play it on turn 4 in most cases. I think this is a Dimir card that you feel pretty good about first picking despite the mana requirements, and I think it's just a straight up B. Next, we have Notion Rain, which for 1 generic, a blue and a black, is a common sorcery that says Surveil 2, then draw 2 cards, then Notion Rain deals 2 to you. This is a new version of Read the Bones, and that's a good card to be compared to. Paying 3 to draw 2 is already a pretty reasonable card. You know, it's divination. But adding Surveil to this makes you see much deeper into your library if you want to. This is yet another Dimir card that you want basically anytime you're in the color pair. I don't think you want more than a couple of them because you can only have so many cards that have no immediate impact on the board. But they're going to be nice to cast in the late game and get you a real advantage there. Plus, there's lots of Surveil build-arounds that make this a little better. I think it's a C+. Next, we have Thief of Sanity, which for 1 generic mana, 1 blue and 1 black, is a 2/2 Spectre at rare that has flying, and when it deals combat damage to a player, you look at the top 3 cards of that player's library, exile one of them face down, then put the rest into their graveyard. For as long as that card remains exiled, you may look at it, you may cast it, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast that spell. Wow, this is pretty ridiculous for 3 mana. A 3 mana 2/2 flyer is already like a C in limited, but the fact that this one essentially draws you a card every time it hits your opponent and not just draws you a card, gives you card selection. Worth noting that milling will sometimes help your opponent out, but most of the time it won't make much of a difference, and you'll just be getting a free card from the top of your opponent's library. Yes, if the Spectre dies, which it can to a lot of things, you lose access to the card, but if your opponent doesn't deal with this, they're just going to die to the sheer amount of card advantage that you're going to get over them. Even though this is small, I think this gets all the way into the bomb range, because even if it only hits your opponent once and you only get 1 card out of it and then they kill it, you're still getting a pretty nice 2 for 1. And if they don't kill it, well, they're just going to lose. And I think that makes it an A-. Next, we have Thought Erasure, which for 1 blue and a black is an uncommon sorcery, and it says target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card and has Surveil 1. I don't like this a lot in limited. I'm never the biggest fan of discard effects. This does come with Surveil 1 and can hit any non-land card in their hand, so it will be able to actually do something more frequently than most discard spells. I mean, even if your opponent's hand is empty, it lets you Surveil, and that's not great, obviously, but better than your average discard spell, which does nothing. I think mainboarding one of these is okay, but I think I'll prefer it more out of the sideboard, but I'll give it like a C- as a mainboard card. Next, we have Unmoored Ego, which for 1 generic, a blue and a black, is a rare sorcery. It says choose a card name, search target opponent's graveyard, hand, and library for up to 4 cards with that name, and exile them. That player shuffles their library, then draws a card for each card exiled from their hand this way. This is an F. I'm just going to say that up front. People debate about these effects. I mean, most people who play limited a lot don't really, but I've seen people say these sorts of effects are good in limited. But it's really bad and limited for a number of reasons. First, you don't really have a good idea of what to name in game one, okay? Even if you do know what to name, this is kind of a horrible effect. It's frequently irrelevant. You are paying 3 mana to exile a card or cards that your opponent may not draw anyway. Yeah, I know, this can name lands so you can mill them. Oh boy. Making their deck have fewer lands has to be good, right? I mean, no. This effectively does nothing in most games of Limited, and is a waste of a card in your deck. You need to impact the board somehow, get card advantage somehow, and this doesn't even do that, because even if you do name a card they have like 3 copies of in their hand, they just get to draw 3 cards after the fact. So even like its major success case is still pretty garbage. It's an F. Don't play it. These effects are always bad and limited. They have that stood the test of time ever since this effect started being printed forever ago, and they will always be bad. Don't play them. Next, we have Whisper Agent, which for 1 generic and 2 blue-black hybrid mana is a 3/2 human rogue with flash, and when it enters the battlefield, you surveil 1. A 3 mana 3/2 with flash is a solid C. We just saw one of those in Core Set 2019. You add surveil 1 to that, and I think it moves up to a C+. Flashing this into trade with something will feel pretty good when you're also smoothing out your draws thanks to surveil. That's the last Dimir card. Now let's move to Izzet. Our first card in the Izzet guild is Beacon Bolt, which for 1 generic, a blue, and a red is an uncommon. It says Beacon Bolt deals damage to target creature equal to the total number of instant and sorcery cards you own in exile and in your graveyard, and it has Jumpstart. So this is a good card to start looking at Izzet with, because Izzet cares about instants and sorcery spells, just like Beacon Bolt does, and it's built around the Jumpstart mechanic in large part, which lets you cast spells twice, basically, from your graveyard. And this is one of those instant and sorcery build-arounds. Note, by the way, that it counts cards in exile, so if you jump-started a spell at some point, it will still contribute to how much damage this deals. Your average Izzet deck will likely have at least 5 instants and sorceries, but I think if that's all you got, this probably isn't very good. It's probably like a D. 7 to 10 is where this starts to get really potent. In that kind of deck, it's probably like a B. If you're doing 3 with this, even if you're doing 2 with this, it's like reasonable. And if you're doing 3 or more with it, it starts to get insane. It's an incredible removal spell that will give you so much value. While this has a high ceiling, the floor is bad, and I don't think you usually want to take it pack 1, pick 1, but, you know, maybe you will. Next, we have Beam Splitter Mage, which for 1 blue and a red is a 2/2 Vidalcan Wizard at uncommon, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets only Beam Splitter Mage, if you control 1 or more other creatures that spell could target, choose one of those creatures, copy that spell. The copy targets the chosen creature. Obviously, this takes some building around. Unlike most Izzet cards, it doesn't care about any old instant and sorcery. Instead, it demands that you play combat tricks. This seems especially good with the pair of Jumpstart commons, Maximize Velocity and Maximize Altitude as a 2 mana 2/2. This will be reasonable in any Izzet deck, but to unlock its true power, you may have to play several tricks. I think this is in the C range in your typical Izzet deck. You know, maybe you have 1 trick and it's got decent stats, and if you get like 5 or more tricks, maybe it has a ceiling of B-, but I definitely wouldn't take it early. Next, we have Crackling Drake, which for 2 blue and 2 red is a star 4 Drake at uncommon. It has flying. Its power is equal to the total number of instant and sorcery cards you own in exile and in your graveyard. And when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. Here's the Izzet card in the cycle of double-costed uncommons. And man, I love this card. I always love creatures who like it when you have instants and sorceries in your graveyard, and this one even draws you a card, and also it counts in exile, so jump starting isn't a downside. It is obviously a build-around. You need a spell-heavy deck to really take advantage, but if you get there, this is probably one of the best cards in your deck. Still, the prohibitive mana cost, coupled with the build-aroundy nature of it, keep me from quite pushing it into like a B-, where I might consider first picking it despite its mana cost. Instead, I'm going to put it at a C+. Maybe I'm overly tempering myself here because I want this card to be way better and I don't want to overrate it based on that. But for now, I think I'm going to say it's a C+. Next, we have another split card, the Izzet rare part of the cycle. 1/2 is Expansion, which costs hybrid blue-red mana, 2 hybrid blue-red mana. And it's an instant, and it says copy target instant or sorcery spell with converted mana cost 4 or less. You may choose new targets for the copy. The other half is Explosion, which for X, 2 blue and 2 red, deals X damage to any target, and target player draws X cards. Like most of the cycle of split cards, the second half is where the power is, but it also costs a ton of mana to really be worth it. Though, even casting it for 6, killing an X2 and drawing 2 cards seems pretty good. I think once you get to 7 mana is when it starts to be a little absurd. Like all of the cards, the other half can be good if a situation presents itself, and I think that's a cool design. You really want to aim for the second half, but the first half could end up being useful while you try to get the required mana for the big explosion half. In this case, copying a removal spell that either you or your opponent casts seems pretty appealing to me. Overall, I think this is a C+. Next, we have Firemind's Research, which for 1 blue and a red is a rare enchantment, and it says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a charge counter on Firemind's Research. You can pay 1 generic in a blue to remove 2 charge counters to draw a card, or you can pay 1 in a red to remove 5 charge counters from it, and it deals 5 to any target. Obviously, this is a build-around. Your average limited deck in this format probably has like 4 or 5 instants and sorceries, and that's not enough for this to be playable. It's going to be an F there. This card really asks you to build up charge counters too. It isn't like you get something from an individual spell. You need a bunch of them. Jumpstart helps with that, of course, but getting to the 5 needed to do 5 to something is going to be pretty brutal. Still, when you do, you're going to feel pretty good. Overall, though, I think this card asks a lot out of you, and the payoff is nice, but it's still asking so much, and it doesn't feel like it's quite enough for me to think it's like an incredible build-around. I think it's good. I think it's a C+ in a deck that has lots of instants and sorceries, but I don't think it's going to be like this incredible card just because it asks for so many spells to be cast. Next, we have Goblin Electromancer, which for 1 blue and a red is a 2/2 Goblin Wizard, and it says instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. This is a reprint. A 2-mana 2/2 with upside is always nice, and here the upside is exactly what blue-red wants. Making your blue-red instants and sorceries cheaper is a huge deal, especially alongside Jumpstart, and this guy is going to help enable a lot of blue-red spells matter decks since he is only at common. The nice thing about him, too, is that he's perfectly playable if you end up in a blue-red deck that doesn't get there on spells, or if you play him and he dies before you get any spells, because he's still a 2-mana 2/2. I think he's a C+. I think you play him in any Izzet deck you basically ever draft, but that he's not like, a card that pulls you into that color pair. Next, we have Hypothesizzle, which for 3 generic, a blue and a red is a common instant, and it says draw 2 cards. Then, you may discard a non-land card. When you do, Hypothesizzle deals 4 damage to target creature. This card has a really cool design and sort of feels like a split card, even though it isn't. For 5 mana, you can have it be a draw 2 card spell, which isn't great, but when combined with the other option, where you can discard one of the non-land cards in your hand to do 4 to a creature, that's a pretty good deal. There will be times where it is right to just keep the cards you draw, but most of the time, I think you kill something. I think every Izzet deck wants one of these because it offers a choice between card advantage or removal. Both are things basically any blue-red deck wants to be doing. Plus, if you're discarding a Jumpstart spell to this, you're not really discarding a whole card. I think it's a C+. I think you play one of these at least in every single blue-red deck you ever draft, but it's not the kind of card that pulls you into a color pair. Next, we have Invert and Invent, another split card on the Invert half. It costs 1 blue-red hybrid mana. It's an instant. And it says switch the power and toughness of each of up to 2 target creatures. Man, that sounds good because it doesn't say until end of turn, huh? Well, that was a mistake. Wizards already knows it was a mistake and it's going to be corrected. It's not forever. It's only until end of turn. Still, that's pretty good. The other half is Invent, which for 4, a blue and a red, lets you search your library for an instant card and or a sorcery card. Reveal them, put them in your hand, then shuffle your library. Both halves of this are nice even after the correction to the Invert half. Invert's ability to flip 2 creatures' power and toughness could allow you to get a blowout sometimes. It only costs 1 mana for that. And like all of these cards, if that situation doesn't present itself, you can just wait to cast the more powerful half of the card, which will basically always give you a 2-for-1. Invent draws you an instant and a sorcery spell. It is one of those cards that to take full advantage of, you need to have a nice mix of instants and sorceries. If you have like 1 sorcery and 7 instants, it might not work out so well. But usually it's going to draw you 2 removal spells in most situations, and that's pretty nice. It's another C+, though. You don't have to build around it that hard, but it doesn't pull me into the color pair at all. It just makes me happy that I'm already in a color pair. Next, we have Ionize, which for 1 generic, a blue, and a red is a rare instant, and it says counter target spell. It deals 2 damage to that spell's controller. 3-mana counter spells aren't usually very good in limited. You have to leave up a lot of mana. Counter spells have a lot of downsides to them. If your opponent doesn't play the thing at the right time when you actually have the mana up, then maybe they play it when you don't have the mana up. It's just, they're so situational that they can be really problematic in a format like Limited, where you're not just always going to be leaving mana up and firing off instants at the end of your opponent's turn, like you could in a constructed control deck, where this will probably be pretty good. Instead, you need to be building your board. You don't really cast counter magic in Limited until you reach the point where you can't actually do anything with the mana anyway, and then you leave it up, and then maybe you get them with it. All of that said, I think doing 2 to the spell's controller makes this a little bit better. Obviously, it's better than just cancel because it does that, but I don't think it's incredible or anything. I think you play it in your blue-red decks, but you probably cut it occasionally too. I think it's just a C. Next, we have League Guild Mage, which for 1 blue and a red is a 2/2 human wizard at uncommon. You can pay 3 generic and a blue and tap it to draw a card, or you can pay X and red and tap it to copy target instant or sorcery spell you control with converted mana cost X. You may choose new targets for the copy. This is the card I got to preview, and I was pretty happy to get to preview it because it is awesome. Azure Mage was awesome when we saw it, and this is better since it has additional abilities and better stats. Like a lot of Izzet cards, it does like it if you have instants and sorceries, but even if you don't, this can be an excellent place to spend mana by drawing an extra card every turn in the mid to late game. I feel like that kind of power pushes it into the B- range. I think it's the only Guild Mage in the set that really makes you think about first picking it. It's a really, really good card. And obviously, if you're Izzet, you always play it. Next, we have Niv Mizzet Perrin, which unfortunately costs 3 blue mana and 3 red mana. It's a legendary creature, dragon wizard. It's rare, can't be countered, has flying. Whenever you draw a card, it deals 1 damage to any target. And whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell, you draw a card. Throughout all of this set review, I've been talking about how good the fixing is in this set, and it is. But Niv Mizzet will be a real test of just how good that fixing is. Costing 3 of each color is steep. And yeah, what you get for that investment is a 5/5 flyer who does 1 damage to something every time you draw a card. That also draws you a card every time any player casts an instant or sorcery. So it's good. You get a lot out of it if you can play him, so the payoff is there, but you really need to have a very strong mana base for this to work out for you and not end up stranded in your hand. And he's not in green, which has access to the best fixing. So as a result, despite all that power, I think you have to steer clear of first picking him. You just can't count on being able to consistently cast him. I wish you could. I wish he had hybrid mana. I don't know. I wish they did something different with his mana cost. As is, it's very hard to cast. He is very powerful, but good luck casting him. I think you got to give them a C+. I mean, you could first pick him. I mean, he has the power of a first pick card. You know, if you get to actually cast him, he's like an A. But how often is that going to happen? I mean, you could first pick him and then like take all the fixing in the world, and then maybe it works out. You have like 4 Izzet Guild Gates or whatever, but I have a hard time getting behind a card that's this hard to cast. So I've got to give him a C+, with the caveat that if you do get him in play, well, you're probably going to win. Next up is Piston Fist Cyclops, which for 1 generic and 2 blue-red hybrid mana is a Cyclops at common. It has Defender, and as long as you've cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn, it can attack as though it didn't have Defender, and it is a 4/3. You can do worse than a 3 mana 4/3 with Defender. It will definitely hold back a lot of creatures from attacking, and I think it's probably like a C- in your average limited deck, which will be able to make him attack once or twice in most cases. If your deck has more instants and sorcery spells, getting close to 7 or more, it gets better because it will attack more. Like all, when you cast instant and sorcery spell cards in the set, Jumpstart will be its best friend, and I think it's a C+ in those decks. Next, we have Rawl Izzet Viceroy, who for 3 generic, a blue and a red, is a legendary planeswalker, Rawl at Mythic Rare. It starts with 5 loyalty. He has a +1 loyalty ability that lets you look at the top 2 cards of your library. You put 1 into your hand and the other into your graveyard. He has a -3 ability that says Rawl Izzet Viceroy deals damage to target creature equal to the number of instant and sorcery cards you own in exile and in your graveyard. And he has a -8 that says you get an emblem with whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, this emblem deals 4 damage to any target and you draw 2 cards. Lately, we've seen a lot of planeswalkers that are more build-aroundy than they are just like sheer powerful, and Rawl is another one of those. He starts at high loyalty and can start drawing you cards right away, which is nice, but his -3 is going to be bad unless you have lots of instants and sorceries in his deck. Now, his +1 does fuel the -3, but you need to be a spells deck to fully take advantage of Rawl. That said, he is still playable in a deck that has very few instants and sorceries, just because if your opponent doesn't kill something that is giving you an extra card every turn, they're going to lose eventually. But he really needs instants and sorceries to shine. Because of that, I'm giving him 2 grades. He's a build-around. He's probably like a C in your average limited deck in this format, but once you get to lots of instants and sorceries, let's say 7, he's probably a B because his -3 will be able to kill a lot of creatures. I think he's probably going to be worth taking with the first pick because the ceiling's so high and the floor is so reasonable, so that's something to keep in mind. Next, we have Sonic Assault, which for 1 generic, a blue and a red, is a common instant, and it says tap target creature. Sonic Assault deals 2 damage to that creature's controller, and it has Jumpstart. Tapping a creature at instant speed for 3 mana usually comes with it doesn't untap in its next untap phase line of text, but they traded that in for doing 2 damage to your opponent and having Jumpstart. This card isn't anything special, but it can definitely assist you in doing the last few damage at the end of the game, between doing 2 to them and tapping down their best blocker at the end of their turn. And if it was good the first time you used it, it will be devastating the second time. At the same time, this isn't going to be particularly powerful in a deck that isn't interested in one of those two things, attacking a lot or playing lots of instants and sorceries. The good news is I think Izzet decks will usually fall in one or both of those categories, making this a decent playable in an Izzet deck, though I'm not sure you really want more than one in most cases, and I'm giving it a C. Next, we have Thousand Year Storm, which for 4 generic, a blue, and a red is a mythic rare enchantment. And it says, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy it for each other instant and sorcery spell you've cast before it this turn. You may choose new targets for the copies. So this is a cool design, but I think I'm going to say up front this will be unplayable and limited. If you have a lot of cheap spells in your deck, I could see it working out, but generally getting enough free spells in limited to make playing this 6 mana do-nothing enchantment work for you is going to be difficult, to say the least. It does get a little interesting with Jumpstart around because you can cast a spell and then Jumpstart it and get the spell twice, but you still need the mana and extra card to cast that spell. Holding on to spells until you can play this will frequently just be a bad idea, especially because on turn 6 you're planning on tapping out to play this and not developing your board at all, which can be devastating if your opponent has a decent board state, and if you've been holding on to your instants and sorceries, waiting to use them until after you play this, that's going to be bad. This is admittedly a difficult card to evaluate, but I think I'm going to give it that F. I could maybe give it a build around grade 2, but I think that deck will work out so infrequently that I don't think it's worth it. Next is our last Izzet card, which is Weed Dragonauts, which for 1 generic, a blue and a red is a 1/3 fairy wizard at uncommon. It has flying, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. This is a cool reprint from the original Ravnica. A 3 mana 1/3 flyer isn't very good, but the fact that this becomes a 3/3 or potentially larger if you cast multiple spells, which because of Jumpstart is possible, that's pretty nice. Definitely not the kind of spells payoff or Izzet card that pushes you into the deck, but a card you feel fine about having in your deck once you're already there. I think it's a C+. Now we move to Selesnya, where our first card is a split card, Assure and Assemble. The Assure half costs 2 hybrid mana, green-white hybrid mana. It's an instant, it's rare, and it says put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. That creature gains indestructible until end of turn. And the other half, Assemble, for 4 generic, a green and a white, is also an instant, and it says create 3/2/2 green and white Elf Knight creature tokens with Vigilance. Like all the cards we've seen already in this cycle, this is good. Both halves of the card are nice, with the Assurance half getting cast if a situation emerges where it can produce some serious value or save an important creature, and the Association part getting cast if you get to 6 mana. This one doesn't quite tempt me enough to take it with a first pick, because it's not like removal and it doesn't do something hugely impressive even on its more expensive half, but you play it in 100% of the Selesnya decks you draft. It's a great card, and I'm giving it a C+. Next we have Camaraderie, which for 4 generic, a green and a white is a rare sorcery, and it says you gain X life and draw X cards, where X is the number of creatures you control. Creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. This is very strong. Sure, this can do almost nothing, but most of the time it's going to do something, and as long as you have like 3 creatures in play, I think you feel right about your investment. The higher the number of creatures you have in play gets, the crazier it gets, since obviously if you have way more than that, pumping them all is also going to be impactful. And the huge number of cards you draw and the life you gain obviously increases. There will be times where this is super ineffective, but I think it will end most games, if not on the spot, in the next couple of turns from the cards you draw. I'm giving this a B. I think it's strong enough to take with the first pick and see if Selesnya works out. The risk is worth it. Next we have Centaur Peacemaker, which for 1 generic, a green and a white is a 3/3 Centaur Cleric, and when it enters the battlefield, each player gains 4 life, also common. 3 mana 3/3s are good, but I don't really like the 4 life gained part of this. Seems like it might be nice against the Boros deck in this format, but all the other decks in the format look grindier than Selesnya, so giving your opponent 4 life when you're the beatdown doesn't seem ideal to me. I don't know, I think this is a decent card. I think you'll play it a little more often than you won't, but not by much. I'm giving it a C-. Next we have Conclave Cavalier, which for 2 green and 2 white is a 4/4 Centaur Knight at uncommon, has Vigilance, and when it dies it creates 2/2/2 green and white Elf Knight creature tokens with Vigilance. So this is basically an Elf Worm Coil engine. A 4 mana 4/4 that leaves behind 2 tokens is very powerful. The downside here is that it's a very mana intensive card, but I think the power here is worth it, as it is for a lot of the cards in this cycle. I think you can take this pack 1, pick 1 in a decent number of situations. It's that good, and I'm going to give it a B. Next we have Conclave Guildmage, which for a green and a white is a 2/2 Elf Cleric at uncommon. You can pay a green and tap it, and creatures you control gain trample until end of turn, and you can pay 5 generic and a white to create a 2/2 green and white Elf creature token with Vigilance. This Guildmage, like all of them, is quite good. 1 mana to give trample to your whole team can be nice, assuming you have some big boys. The other activated ability feels super overcosted, especially compared to what the other Guildmages are capable of, but it's still a good late game mana sink. I don't think this Guildmage tempts you to take it with a first pick, or really tempts you into its color pair, at least not really early, but obviously you play them in any Selesnya deck you ever draft, and I'm giving it a C+. Next we have Amara, Soul of the Accord, which is a green and a white for a 2/2 legendary Elf Cleric at rare, and whenever it becomes tapped, it creates a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. This does a good job in the vanilla test, and it has a fairly powerful ability. Note that it is when it becomes tapped, which sure will be from attacking regularly, but this will really shine when you combine it with Convoke, which Selesnya has all over the place. If you do play this on turn 2, and you're the one on the play, there's a good chance you get a free hit and a soldier, which incidentally will help you Convoke things out more quickly too. So this is basically one of the best Convoke enablers around. This is a good card, and one I think I feel fine about first picking over stuff that isn't premium removal or a bomb. I'm going to give it a B-. Next, we have the other split card for green-white, and that is Flower or Flourish. The Flower half costs a green or a white. It's hybrid mana. It's a sorcery. It's uncommon. It says search your library for a basic forest or plains, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. The Flourish half is also a sorcery. It costs 4 generic, a green, and a white. It's an uncommon, and it says creatures you control get +2/+2 until end of turn. So one side on this is a guaranteed land drop and even a bit of fixing. If you have a hand that is lacking 1 color, this makes the hand instantly keepable. Like basically all the split cards in the set, the other side is going to be strong late, though in this case, 6 mana to give +2/+2 to your whole team at sorcery speed is actually a bit underwhelming. This might be it's still a solid card, but I think it's probably the worst of this cycle, which is mostly very powerful. I know they had to inflate the cost a bit here because it's so flexible, but I feel like I should get Vigilance or something with the investment. All that said, it's still a solid card and obviously a good fit in its color pair, which is interested in going wide, so the +2/+2 effect will be strong even at sorcery speed, but I think it's just a C. Next, we have Join Shields, which for 3 generic, a green and a white, is an uncommon instant, and it says untap all creatures you control. They gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. This kind of effect is worse than it looks. Indestructible and hexproof are 2 of Magic's most powerful keywords, but I think this is mostly a trap. 5 mana is a lot to have to leave up. You'd rather be building your board. In the later game, it gets a little bit better, but still, there will be times, lots of them, where this is useless. Since it doesn't make creatures bigger at all, it doesn't really help you in combat unless your opponent's creatures are already smaller, in which case, you should already be able to block and attack pretty well without this. Sure, you can use this, make your whole team indestructible and block some huge creature and take it down. That's going to feel alright. This also can essentially counter board sweepers and other removal spells in a pinch, but 5 mana is probably only worth it in the case of straight up wrath effects. Overall, I think this card should mostly be avoided. I think maybe it's more of a sideboard card, but for now I'm going to give it a D. Next, we have Knight of Autumn, which for 1 generic, a green, and a white is a 2/1 Dryad Knight at rare. When it enters the battlefield, you have 3 different options. You put 2+1/+1 counters on Knight of Autumn, you destroy target artifact enchantment, or you gain 4 life. This card's good and limited, but will probably be even better in constructed. I like all the options it gives you. They're all pretty attractive. It's either a 3 mana 4/3, a Reclamation Sage, or a 3 mana 2/1 that gains you some life. There will be game states where any of these could be nice. This will go great in green-white decks, but it's not really the kind of card that's going to tempt me into being green-white. It's not like hugely impactful. It's just great that it's flexible, and any of those options are good for 3 mana, but none of them is like going to be world-beating or anything. So I think it's just a C+. Next, we have Ledev Champion, which for 1 generic, a green and a white, is a 2/2 Elf Knight at uncommon, and whenever it attacks, you may tap any number of untapped creatures you control, and it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each creature tapped this way. You can also pay 3 generic, a green, and a white to create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. This is another card pushing you in the direction of making tokens, between its own ability to make tokens and the fact he wants you to have lots of creatures in play. One thing that kind of sucks about it is you have to show your opponent how much you're going to pump it when you go into combat. It isn't like some other cards we've seen where you can pump it at instant speed and really give your opponent a headache, and the threat of activation is awesome. That weakens this card significantly. However, even without evasion, a creature like this can really represent a serious threat to your opponent if you're able to go wide enough, and it is nice that it has a good late game mana sink ability too that guarantees you will continue to build your board whether you start flooding or not. But I don't think this is like an overly impressive gold card for the green-white decks. I think it's just basically like a medium filler card, and I'm going to give it a C. Next, we have March of the Multitudes, which for X green, white, white is a mythic rare instant. It has Convoke, and it creates X/1/1 white soldier creature tokens with lifelink. This is very powerful. Sort of like Secure the Wastes, which was a bomb. This does maybe sometimes feel a little bit like a win more card. If you have enough creatures to convoke this and make 1 billion tokens, you probably already had a board capable of winning the game anyway. I mean, you do get to double your creatures basically, and that's a good way to break up a board stall. And doing this at instant speed seems especially nasty. And I think for all those reasons, it is an amazing, powerful card that frequently after you cast it will win the game. Even if you're in a pinch and you can't really like power something out that's awesome with March of the Multitudes, and you just make like 4 tokens, doing that at instant speed sometimes, while it isn't going to be awesome, could find you really stabilizing off of that. Don't forget the creatures have lifelink too. I think this is first pickable. It does have a difficult mana cost, and I think it's one of the bigger bombs in the set in general. I'm going to give it an A-. Next, we have Rosemane Centaur, which for 3, a green and a white is a 4/4 Centaur soldier. At common, it has Convoke, and it has Vigilance. 5 mana for a 4/4 with Vigilance is fine, but nothing special. Being able to power this out even sooner with Convoke is nice, but it still isn't the kind of card that really concerns your opponent. I don't think this is the Convoke card you're hoping you're going to get if you're in green-white, but it's a solid playable, and I'm going to give it a C. Next, we have Samala Woodshaper, who for 2 generic, a green and a white, is a 2/1 Elf Druid at common, and when it enters the battlefield, you look at the top 4 cards of your library, and you can reveal a creature or enchantment card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. You all know I'm a fan of creatures that can give me a 2-for-1, and that's what this will do for you most of the time. Chances are very good that you hit a card with it, and then the 2 power means it can trade with some random X2. 2-for-1s go a long way towards improving your chances in a game of Magic, and this represents one. Still, I'm not going to let my love of this type of card cloud my judgment. At least, I don't think I am. I think it's a solid card that you probably are happy to have multiples of. Probably not more than 2, really, in a green-white deck, but I think that makes it a C+. Next, we have Trostani Discordant, which for 3 generic, a green and a white, is a 1/4 legendary Dryad at mythic rare. Other creatures you control get +1/+1. When it enters the battlefield, you create 2/1/1 white soldier creature tokens with lifelink. And at the beginning of your end step, each player gains control of all creatures they own. This is really strong. On its own, Trostani Discordant gives you 5/9 worth of power and toughness for 5 mana, and 4/4 of that has lifelink. I'm on board with that all the time. Obviously, if you have more of a board, which you usually will, the Anthem effect will add even more damage to the board, and chances are good you have more of a board on turn 5. Her last line of text will almost never come up. There are very few ways to steal creatures in this format, but hey, it's a little more upside on what is already a very powerful card. All in all, this is the kind of gold card that you pretty much windmill slam first pick, despite the fact that it's gold because it is so powerful. It is just a straight up A. Next up, we have Vernati Shieldmate, which for 1 generic and green-white hybrid mana is a human soldier at common. It has Vigilance. It's a 2/2. 2 mana 2/2s with Vigilance are fine. Sort of a mediocre filler 2-drop that you'll end up playing more often than not. It's also nice that because of the hybrid mana, this can be a 2-drop in your red-white Boros decks if you need it. But in both decks, it's not really the 2-drop that you really want, and you'll probably cut it for better 2-drops. I think it's just a C-. Next up, we have World Soul Colossus, which is actually our last card in this video. For X generic mana, a green and a white, it is a 0/0 elemental at uncommon. It has Convoke, and it enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. This is a nice creature to have as a finisher in your creature-heavy Selesnya deck, as it can come down pretty huge for relatively little mana. However, its lack of any evasiveness does limit its effectiveness, and overall, I think that while you play this and feel fine about it in your typical Selesnya deck, It isn't the kind of card that tempts you into the color pair at all. You just take it if you're already in Selesnya, and for me that means it's a C+. Well, that does it for this video. We've looked at the first 3 guilds in the set. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so others can enjoy it too. If you have anything you disagree with me about, let me know in the comments. And if you want to make sure you catch future content, including tomorrow's video, which will be the last video in the full set review, though we have a lot more content coming out talking about this format. But the last video where I will finish looking at all the cards, and it'll look at Boros, Golgari, artifacts, and lands. And that video comes out tomorrow. And if you want to make sure you catch that, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.